Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this morning's Stifel conference call titled Evolving Transportation Business for the Future of Freight Movement. At this time, all participants have been placed on a listen-only mode, and we will open the floor for your questions and comments after the presentation. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to your host, Bruce Chan. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tom. As Tom said, my name is Bruce Chan, and I'm the Global Logistics Analyst here at Stifel. I want to wish a good morning to all of you joining us on the call. First and foremost, I hope you're healthy and safe, and I also hope you're finding some sense of normality and routine amongst all this disruption that we're having. I'm very excited to host this call today for a couple of reasons. First of all, it features our good friends at Carrier Direct, which is a strategy consulting firm that has really built a nice focused niche on the technology side of the transportation and logistics business. We've known Carrier Direct for a long time, and we've watched their client list grow to include some of the largest businesses in and around our space. We've got some of the best and brightest joining us from the team today, including Peter Rentschler, who's CEO, as well as Ryan Schreiber, Director of Engagement, and Joe Junke, who is the VP of Technology Strategy. All of these gentlemen have a number of years of experience coming at some of these problems that the industry is facing from both an industry perspective as well as a technology perspective. So, very happy to have their input. The other reason why I'm excited about this call is that it marks somewhat of a return to normal business, at least for us. For the past couple of weeks, of course, we've been so focused on the view 5 feet in front of us that it's going to be nice to take a look at some longer-term strategic issues. That doesn't mean that we're going to be devoid of coronavirus conversation on this call, because those impacts, I think, are going to be far-reaching, and I think they really highlight some of the importance of having a really cogent technology strategy to help navigate what's becoming an increasingly complicated and volatile world. But again, the focus here is, how do you make your business more proactive rather than reactive? One of the important things that the team is going to help us to do today is to reset how we think about transportation technology. It's not just about picking a TMS or technology vendor, because there are lots of them out there, and there may be some very fundamental differences between them. That's, of course, the namesake of this presentation. But the idea is that technology is not a commoditized tool. That viewpoint, I think, has become quite outdated. Building a deep and responsive strategy that reflects really all aspects of your business and organizational strategy is going to be critical to success in the future. So, I'm not an expert. I'm not going to, belabor this point anymore, and I'm going to turn it over to the experts and let them tell you a little bit more about the topic today. But before I do, if you haven't received a copy of the slide deck, please send an email to my associate, Roxana Islam. Her email address is islamr@stifel.com. That's islamr@stifel.com. And I'm sure she'd be happy to send you a copy. But at this point, Ryan, why don't I hand over the call to you, and you can take us into the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I appreciate you having us. I definitely want to reiterate that I hope everyone is safe and healthy. It's interesting, Bruce, that you said the thing about a little bit of a return to normalcy, right? When we first started talking about doing this, or when we first set this call, it was only about a month ago, and the world is just like remarkably difficult or different from when we first set this call date, which is just really interesting to think about. This topic today is actually in some ways is more important. To your point, like we're going to talk about, this kind of a little bit in the abstract of coronavirus, but it's still much more top of mind right now in a manner of speaking, because a lot of companies have felt pain in trying to move quickly related to their operating model and their technology in, like adjusting either to work remote or into having to adjust operations to serve their customers differently in this environment. So today we're going to talk about how TMS selection is not technology strategy. And the goal really is going to be to explain why and what we mean by that, what's hard about moving the conversation forward in the industry and also in your businesses, and then what are the tangible differences that make modern software, how it's built, different and better. So I'm going to go slide 2, looking at the agenda just really quickly. Peter will give you a little bit of an intro to Carrier Direct and our team. and then we'll look at why this is difficult, what's changed around technology. We'll look at kind of like what that means, really tactically, and then a couple of things that we can do today in your business to start moving the ball forward and the conversation forward. We want to leave you with something actionable. So, Peter, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you to slide 3 and talk about our team.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for the handoff, and also thanks to Bruce and the group and the folks at Stifel for having us all on the call. So my name's Peter Rentschler. I'm the CEO of CareDirect, and just want to give kind of a quick overview of CareDirect and our business. So we are a management consulting and custom software development company entirely focused on the logistics and transportation sector. So we do kind of, our work falls into one of 3 buckets. Traditional management consulting, things like how do we help the business grow? How do we redesign the organization structure to operate more efficiently? Process improvement. We also help folks with things like compensation programs and redesigning their training programs to help accelerate onboarding of new employees. We also, kind of the second bucket of work that we do is technology strategy, which is really the focus of today's call. And when we say technology strategy, to us, what that means is really focusing on understanding where's your business going? What's the future vision? What are the imperatives for the business over the next 3 to 5 years? And then subsequently, what technology capabilities do you need to support that? And it's not just what systems do you need, but it's also do you need a lot of your own software developers if you're planning on building some proprietary technology? Or if you're going to buy technology, then you need software developers and engineers that are really strong at integrations. So that's a little bit about technology strategy. And then our third kind of bucket of services is custom software development, where we've built TMSs, we've built integrations, we've integrated third-party software, and then we've also built different modules and components, everything from pricing engines to margin management to tracking portals. So I mentioned we work exclusively in freight and transportation. Our customers fall into one of 3 buckets. The first are capacity providers. So these are 3PLs, carriers, freight brokerages, and a few of our customers are listed on the slide. The second bucket would be shippers, so retailers, manufacturers, distributors. And then the third bucket are actual technology companies that serve the transportation logistics space. So those would be companies like TruckStop.com and FreightWaves and Project 44. Third point that I just want to make is just talking a little bit about our team. And it's interesting, Ryan, Joe, and myself, who are all on the call, are fairly representative of how our team is built. My background, I started my career doing strategy consulting at Accenture, kind of typical classically trained consultant. Ryan has spent 10 years in the transportation space, working for freight brokerages, carriers, some technology companies as well. And then finally, Joe has spent his 20-plus year career entirely focused on transforming legacy technology into the modern world. And so our company of about 35 employees based in Chicago is representative of this, where there's a mix of kind of classically trained consultants, classically trained technologists, and then deep industry expertise. And from our perspective, the value prop there is that it means that we bring some of the structured problem solving and methodologies and frameworks from outside the industry, combined with real industry expertise of folks who have felt the pain that our customers do on a day-to-day basis. And as a result, we can help with kind of real actionable strategies and the change management associated. So I just want to move on to, and I'll do my best to call out the slide numbers. So moving on to slide 4 for those following along on the PDF that was sent out earlier today. The title is today's 3 core focus areas. And really, we want to make sure that we're explicit around what we're focusing on and what we want to accomplish today, because we can't cover everything. Our message is not just about the software you use and the systems you buy. Tech strategy has direct and indirect implications across your business. Our goal today is to help you understand why it's hard to get everyone on the same page, what technology strategy means, and how modern software is different, and then a few things that you can do to actually start down that path. So first, why it's hard and why it's been difficult for our industry. Why have folks been talking past each other? I mean, we want to help change the frame of reference to make different and to give you the tools that you need to have those conversations. We want to make the point that really technology has changed and the way that people need to think about technology has changed. If you don't, you'll miss out on the benefits of these new methodologies. It's to Ryan's point that allow firms to move faster. The second point is really around what does technology strategy mean and why is it important? The point here is that it affects all aspects of the operating model and it's constantly evolving. The most successful businesses today are the ones who will be the most successful in the future, and the ones that will be the most successful in the future use technology as an enabler to make rapid adjustments across their business. The more agile that you can be in your business model as a result of the technology that you use, the more successful that you can be in the future when crazy situations like the COVID-19 pandemic come up. This is really where having technology that's customized or configured to your optimized business process is a huge enabler. With everything going on, the question of how to improve operations to the bottom line is coming up more frequently, at least with our customers. Software needs to support an optimized operating model, and a huge opportunity we see in almost every business is rooting out an incredible amount of waste around bad process that's been designed around old technology. Everyone kind of talks about the Amazon effect, and to us, this is the biggest thing that makes Amazon Amazon. They leverage modern software and modern technology that allows them to optimize their business model and move very quickly. The third thing that we want to make sure that you can walk away from today's conversation with is really, we want to make sure that you know that you have some guidance on what to do. We're big believers in helping enable everyone in the world to actually take action on our guidance and recommendations. The most important thing you want to do is deciding the direction you take your business and what's your risk tolerance. From there, it's around planning the change over time. And to be super clear, tech strategy isn't just about the technology. There are implications for people, process, et cetera, and there will be changes across your business that have to be made. That being said, I think I'll hand it back over to Ryan to talk about PANS.
Yeah, thanks. So next we're going to talk about kind of why it's hard and what's changed. So the three highlights that we're going to hit in this next section, that you're not speaking the same language, that we're all not speaking the same language, overcoming current state bias, and then how modern software allows you to do more with the same folks. So moving to the slide with PANS on it, it's pretty hard to miss this one. I really like analogies because I truly believe that tying big problems to real world examples helps us wrap our head around it in ways that we kind of can't when we talk really directly at it. So the number one problem to overcome and what it has to do with PANS is going to be interesting, and I hope you guys stick around to hear it. I got to give a little bit of a shout out to Bruce here. I used to use a different analogy to make this point, and he helped me come to PANS. So Bruce, thanks, and I'm glad to roll this out here. Talking about technology strategy is like talking about PANS because of the possibility for unwitting miscommunication. Two people can be talking about tech and tech strategy and think they're speaking the same language and agreeing, and actually really be talking two totally different languages and past each other. So when I say one system and you say one system, we often mean different things. So part of this is kind of getting that focus. So here's an example and how it has to do with PANS. Let's say that I'm American and you're British. We both speak English. So I start telling you a story about how on Christmas Day with my family, my mother-in-law walks up and hands me a gift. And she says to me, Ryan, I saw these in the store and I immediately thought of you. And I unwrap the present and inside are a pair of pants. And I say to my mother-in-law, wow, these look great. And given how I normally dress around you, I can totally see why you saw these and why you thought of me. And we both laugh about that. And my mother-in-law says, Ryan, Go try these on. I think they look great. I want to make sure that I see how they fit. So I go in the other room, I come back, I'm wearing my pants, and I show it off to my whole family, and we all love it. Well, because I'm an American, when I say pants, I mean trousers. So you're British. And when you hear pants, you think underwear. So I think I just told you a story about how my mother-in-law bought me a pair of pants and how nice it was and how great they were. You think I told you a super creepy story about how I'm normally wearing whitey tighties around my mother-in-law. She saw them in the store, wanted me to put them on, and prayed around my whole family on Christmas morning. Like, this happens all the time with technology strategy. No two people are operating on the same basic understanding often. There's a gulf between us, and often it's between the business leaders and the most technical. So the first problem that we want to level set on is making sure we're speaking the same language, particularly when it comes to talking about how software is different. So we want to make sure that we're going to reinforce that message today so that we can start moving the path forward there. I'm going to move on to slide 7, where there's a racehorse and a car. So I'm going to go along with the analogies again. Problem number 2 in your organization is overcoming current state bias. And this has both tech applications and, the applications to how you problems that you've historically faced in your business. And Peter mentioned Amazon a little bit earlier, right? This is another example. Amazon devises the best solution to apply the best operating model and technology without regard to what they're doing today. They look through the windshield and decouple their current state from where they want to go and the art of the possible. So at the heart of the current state bias problem is actually frame of reference. What we've come to realize is when we used to talk to people about technology strategy and say it's not just TMS selection, we would get a lot of heads nodding yes. And at the end of that conversation, too frequently, the response would be, I totally agree with you, Ryan, Peter, Joe. It's absolutely not just a TMS selection. It's a whole thing. But by the way, what TMS should I be on again? And and so what we realized is that it's a frame of reference problem. So to represent that, Henry Ford famously once said that if he had asked people what they wanted to solve their daily mobility problem, they would have said a faster horse. Well, why didn't they say a car when he asked them? It's obvious to us now. How in the world would people in 1908, before the Model T, have thought of a car when it didn't exist yet? They didn't have the frame of reference for solving their problem. Their frame of reference only included a horse, or primarily included a horse, as their daily means of transportation. So they were limited in thinking about new opportunities and might have come with improved efficiencies. They were also rooted in problems of their current quote-unquote operating model, right? How can we get faster when historically this is only as fast as we can go? We can't breed a horse to be any faster than this. Technology is much more esoteric. And while I can put a horse and a car side by side, and they're obviously different, you can't put a monolithic application or next to microservice application and see how different they are. The same is true of cloud versus on-prem or server farm. You can't look at them and intuitively understand how different they are, which is why I go with analogies often. Your business is rife with the current historical challenges that anchor leaders. And to be successful in tech strategy, you've got to start thinking about the art of the possible and work backwards to the problems that you need to solve to get there. So just like trousers, our goal today is going to be to help you wrap your head around how monolithic software on-prem or in a server farm is a horse, microservices in the cloud is a car. So Peter, I'll hand it back to you for our last analogy, a cable. We'll slide in.
Thanks, Ryan. Yep. So we're on slide 8 now. So another analogy to explain what's changed and kind of the difference between monolithic technology versus microservices. The difference between how software has historically been built and deployed, which would be a monolith or an on-premise or even in the server farm, and today, which would be more microservices or cloud, is kind of like how you used to buy a television. Think of software features like channels. Let's say you really want NBC Sports, the Big Ten Network, and Fox Sports. Historically, cable and satellite providers always had a way of smattering different packages with different channels in each. Invariably, you were always left with just a few choices. There was always one package that had everything that you wanted, but that package also had a bunch of stuff that you didn't, and it was expensive as a result. It was also complicated to find the actual packages that you, or the actual channels that you wanted, because you had to filter through the 200 that the cable company provided that as a part of the package that you didn't want. So your choice was to pay too much and get extras that you don't need so you can get everything you do, or don't get everything you're looking for by going with a more affordable package. The analogy for kind of building your own, you could put a huge satellite dish in your backyard. I mean, you could, but it was a huge investment, and not everything came in so great, especially as things changed. Now, things are a lot different. There's online streaming sources, and you can get your TV straight from the internet. You can have minimal investment in a product like an Apple TV or a Roku or a Chromecast, and you have the option to pick and subscribe to the content that you want. Your universe is expanded to other offerings that the cable providers don't have, because you don't have to invest in this huge, gigantic dish. The evolution of technology is similar to that of TV media for other reasons. It's also much easier to change offerings, and you have ultimate control, not the cable company. When a new channel comes out, or a new network starts offering via internet streaming, like when the NFL network debuted as an example, there used to be a fight between the cable company to get included on packages. You, the subscriber, are stuck with whether your cable company chose to start offering the NFL network or not. There are structural hurdles to overcome between your provider and the people who own the channel, both technical and legal. And switching costs for cable providers were really expensive. So to move from Comcast to AT&T, it was an expensive, time-consuming process. You've got to sit at home all day and wait for someone to show up and pay for the installation. No thanks. Streaming lets you plug and unplug constantly. They're pre-built interfaces to self-service and sign up yourself, so you can constantly be getting the new best thing, even if the new best thing is just an update to what you already have in place. So moving on to slide 9, like this is where we've made our analogies. I think we've made our point. Now we want to start to talk about what does this actually look like in your business. A technology strategy starts with defining your business imperatives. When you go through this exercise, you will end up with business problems to solve, which are on the left. In the old model, you had to buy the big cable TV network package. This would be the old kind of antiquated, or the historical legacy monolithic TMSs. Today, you can get exactly what you want, which would be the bottom portion, where you're just picking and choosing the features or functionality that you want. The big network package meant feature offerings never quite fit. It wasn't exactly what you needed, just like cable. With technology platforms, you have another problem, even when you do get the features that you need. Some are really dialed into your process, and some are just okay, even after a heavy implementation or configuration. Now, if you were a heavy build everything shop or a heavy proprietary technology shop, you had the same problem, just manifested slightly differently. Features may be over or underdeveloped as shifting priorities and changing business needs mean that the features that were spec'd are just different now. How many times has someone had to prioritize a new technology feature just because a big prospective customer contract was riding on it? Now, cloud versus on-prem or server farm is kind of like having to wait for the cable company. System performance suffers in on-premise or server farm because of how demands are made on the system. Likely some of you on the call even felt that really tangibly with COVID-19 and the move to work from home. The server farms where you were hosting your own technology, you realize that you need far more capacity and bandwidth than the technology you had provisioned. Think of modern microservices and cloud as streaming services. They allow you to build smaller pieces of technology together to get the package that you need to solve the specific problems for your business. Those build to a holistic system. Users have no idea that they're operating with multiple pieces of software. This is where the user experience is still a single unified system, even though in the background there may be multiple technologies coming together. These smaller pieces of software communicate together in the cloud, where there are automatic controls in place to ensure the performance is maintained.
This is the operator, Bruce. I'm going to reconnect Peter now. It seemed like his line was degrading.
I'll pick up the thread quickly while he's dialing Peter back in. Yeah, the last point that he was making on slide 9 is that as he started to kind of drop off, is that these small pieces of software communicate together in the cloud, right, where there's these automatic controls that ensure the performance is maintained. That's the difference of true cloud when we quote unquote say true cloud. And more importantly, moving toward this microservice architecture, data is at the center of everything you do because the services have to share that data to accomplish their tasks instead of the data living within the system. That's what we mean when we talk about unlocking the data that's already in your system. So I'll move on to slide 10, and then when Peter comes back, we can have him jump in. So this slide talks about micro buy versus micro build. This is an example of how we talked about the shift from monolithic applications to microservices. This is one of the strategies that microservices enables. Historically, there's been a huge emphasis on what technology you chose because you had to affirmatively opt in to either buy everything in one system or build everything from scratch. The cost to change was astronomical and the risk was incredibly high. So where the risk used to be really, really high for making these big decisions of build everything or buy one huge thing, leveraging these new technologies allows you to drive strategies where you de-risk these technology decisions. So like whereas before you made one choice that came with an enormous price tag, now like we look at breaking this up into 100 smaller decisions. The reality of this is that you will make bad decisions no matter which path you choose. But if you're making one big choice versus 100 small choices, if in 100 small choices, 15 are bad choices, you've still made 85% good choices. And those 15 are really, really easily unplugged and replaced with something else when you realize that they're a bad decision. It's lower risk and lower cost. Another advantage is that microservices allow you to leverage capitalism. I'm going to go back to Amazon again quickly. This is why Amazon spins out services like AWS to make sure that they have best in class. They're leveraging capitalism. Now, you may not do that, but you can go out and buy something else when something else becomes better and because it's easy to plug and unplug. So build the technology that differentiates you and your business model and go and buy the rest that's just commoditized. We talk about how TMS is at its core, quote unquote, load execution. That is non-differentiated. There are things that will differentiate your business. Like, I'll use an example. You're likely not going to go build an entire accounting platform. Usually you're going to buy Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains because it's best in class. It's flexible, and you're a transportation company, not an accounting firm. Accounting is usually not your competitive advantage. So you can apply that to your business with everything, including small workflows like load tendering. We apply that strategy to micro build and micro buy. Piece things together that give you best in class of everything, knowing that you'll make mistakes. You can move faster because the effort and energy in making 100 small decisions is way lower. The risk is way lower than making one big decision where everything is on the line in that decision. It's important to remember that building software that exists openly in the market is a huge waste of resources. And that's part of the reason that a micro buy, micro build strategy is really, really valuable. Trucking and logistics companies of the past saw increased multiples due to their proprietary technology that enabled their business. And we've seen the common mistake where our customers insist on building everything from scratch because they think it will drive a higher multiple. But today, because of how technology is built, that's not true. If you've built technology that's just commoditized and openly available in the market, you are wasting money. and you are wasting people resources, and it negatively impacts that multiple. So look at what if you're going to build anything, look at building what differentiates you, and de-risk those decisions. I don't know if Peter's back, but I just covered his portion, so now I'm going to kind of keep talking for a minute. We'll talk a little bit about like what this means and how to think about it next. So, carrier direct. I'm going to slide 12 now. Carrier direct has been assessing businesses for over 10 years, or for about 10 years, and we talked about how technology strategy is a journey. So in our almost 10 years of assessing, helping transportation companies grow and transform their business, we've developed this framework to look at businesses through this 5-focus lens. Peter talked about earlier how technology strategy is not just about your software tools. Through this lens is how we look at technology. So technology strategy is also your organization. And for us, organization is looking at your business from the top, at the roles and responsibilities of various departments, how the business is organized, and how those different pieces of your business interact with each other. People focuses on everything from compensation and recruiting to onboarding and training to driving adoption of your technology, of the suite of tools you have in your business, and also like what are the capabilities of the humans you need to execute your business. As you move forward with technology tools, the employees in the seat will need to look different, not just in your technology organization, but also in your operations. So do you reskill them? Do you need new people? Those are things you need to be considering in a technology strategy. Process is where where is the work being performed? Like who is responsible for performing that work? How are they working with each other? How are they interacting with each other? How are they interacting with other people outside of the business, in addition inside of the business? And how do they interact with the tools that are available to them? Technology is the systems and tools you're using. It's everything from what are you using to do load execution? What are you using to do accounting? It's also things like what are you using to do email, your phone systems, all of those, Microsoft Excel. All of those are a part of the technology in your business. Culture is how everyone feels about where they work and the core values of the business, and how those translate to the mission and purpose of the business. This is one that like everybody talks about. It's really, really hard to impact. But like when there is a disconnect or cognitive dissonance between what you say your organization's working on and like actually what you're showing people, it's very, very hard. It has a very negative impact on culture. Here's a perfect example. If you want to tell your company that you're moving forward and that you're moving forward within transportation and you're using old tools, employees will not feel like they're working in a modern organization. And it has far-ranging impacts into their willingness to believe you. That's part of culture. So think about it. How do employees feel when they're working with modern tools that help them do more with their job, right? And then think about the impact that also has on things like recruiting. There's far-ranging impacts on all of this. What's important to keep in mind is that when we talk about technology strategy, that it's not just about the software. We've said that 5 or 6 times, and this is why. Because it really has its tentacles in all of these things, and you have to be modeling that out as you go forward. What does efficient process look like? What's the perfect operating model or the best operating model for your organization as you move forward? And how do you set up your business across the board through all 5 of these to maximize value to shareholders, employees, and customers? I'm going to move on to slide 13, which we're going to talk just briefly about what technology strategy is and what technology strategy isn't, and then you'll stop having to listen to me and you can listen to Peter again for a minute. So as I just said, technology strategy is a journey. And as you move through it, the entire business changes, every part of it, all 5 of those that we looked at on the last slide. It's not just the software tools. Technology strategy starts with the business problems that you're facing and where you want to take the business. It is looking through the windshield, figuring out where the business is going. When you're armed with that information and you're able to decouple from your current state bias of like the problems that you're facing or the problems that you faced historically and going through change, you can find the most effective tools to transform your business. That's bullet number 1 on the left. You need to understand your business, look at the levers to pull before even selecting technology. Technology strategy is not about picking this single piece of software that's going to solve all your problems. Like, that's the message that we need to get out today. If you leave with one thing today, please understand that it's not about the TMS. Traditionally, TMS has been at the center, not because it's the best tool or even the most important tool in your business. It's literally just because of how technology has been historically built. That's it. We talked about that earlier. At its core, TMS is about load execution. Other capabilities have been bolted onto that through time because it's what customers demanded. And the only way historically to give a one system feel required one system. That's different now. We've already hit most of the highlights on this slide, but quickly I'll just reiterate. Technology is something that evolves over time, not a one and done solution. It is modeling your technology off your business process, not the other way around, and building teams to support your business, to where your business is going. And it's not just TMS. You're likely already not just using a TMS anyway. It's the Microsoft Dynamics thing, but it's that we talked about in the last part. But it's so much more. So Peter, I'll go ahead and hand it back off to you if you're back. Question mark.
Yep,
and
I'm here.
We'll move to slide 15. We had to send an updated deck to, the last thing I'll say is we had to send an updated deck to Bruce this morning. This may or may not have it in front of you all, so we'll try and voice it over a little bit. Peter, go ahead.
Thanks, Ryan. And sorry, everyone, for somehow I got disconnected. But yeah, so to Ryan's point, we had another slide in here for that some of you may be looking at. It'd be number 15, and the title at the top is TerraDirect Technology Strategy Framework. And there are 3 chevrons across the top with some bullet points underneath. We'll make sure that this goes out for those that haven't gotten it, that it goes out in the updated deck that comes out in the recap. But I'm just what I want to touch on specifically is that there are really, from our perspective, there are 3 phases to this technology strategy. The first is, where's your business going? The second is, what are the business imperatives? And the third is, what are the technology capabilities that you need? So what I'll do is just kind of talk through these 3 different phases briefly. So first, as the leaders of the organization, you need to look through the windshield and get consensus on where the business is going. In the intro, we talked about how you have to challenge your team's way of thinking. This is the place where that's the most important. As leaders, you have the best perspective on broader market forces impacting your business, your objectives, your risk tolerance, and your ability to make financial commitments. Leaders are also the ones most caught up in what got us here, the sunk cost fallacy, and the baggage of organizational inertia. We see the hardest part here is getting consensus. Leaders across the organization have conflicting priorities and vision for the future. We typically do this through a series of workshops with leaders to suss out the blockers and really understand what the business needs to get to the future state. And for what it's worth, we've seen this as a great place to bring in some of your company's emerging leaders to help build the bench and get them thinking about and to get perspective from folks that are a little more mid-level and lower level that are closer to the actual work that's being done. So in parallel, the second phase of this technology strategy framework is, what are the business imperatives? And this is where this happens at every level in the organization, from the newest rookie all the way up to the CEO. Typically, we'll do this as a series of interviews to understand to identify what are the must-haves versus the nice to haves versus the pie in the sky. Hey, it'd be really great if we could do this. There's a great example that we use for the need for identifying and defining these business imperatives on the front end. A couple of years ago, we helped a company with a new TMS selection. The decision was they made the decision to do a hybrid build and buy model, and they wanted to buy some foundational technology components. In the first round, before we actually did any demos, we looked at a total of about 60 TMS platforms, and we actually narrowed it down to a list of about 10 based on the must-have criteria. Leaderships, there was specifically one major TMS provider that didn't even make it past this first round. And the leadership team literally thought that we'd made a mistake. They couldn't believe it. They thought that we weren't doing our due diligence. And they asked, why wasn't this provider included? Well, for this specific business, they operated cross-border freight, and they had an office in Laredo that had bilingual employees. And their current TMS supported English and Spanish versions natively. This major TMS provider's core product didn't offer bilingual capabilities, and therefore didn't meet the line of you must be this tall to ride the ride. This is a great example of how really focusing and honing in on those business imperatives on the front end is so critical, because it's so easy to get sold all of the fancy, shiny features by technology providers that are exciting for them, but not what your business needs. So once you've actually understood what you want to do, what you're willing to do, and what you must have from technology, you have to understand your current state and then define the technology capabilities that are needed. And this is where you focus on understanding what are your current capabilities, what's the inventory of what you have today, what are all the different systems that you use, what departments and functions use those, how critical are they, and then once you have that inventory, you can start to define what you believe that the future state is going to be based on the business imperatives that you've just identified. From there, you actually do a gap analysis, understanding the gaps between your current state and what the future state is of where you want to go. And then you prioritize those gaps and filling those in based on where the highest impact is, and then also if there are any foundational baseline sequential items that you have to do. So with that being said, I want to move on to our slide numbers may be a little bit off right now, but so for some it'll be slide 16 and for others it'll be slide 15, which is really like the steps towards so the title is Steps Towards Realizing a Technology Strategy. And there are 4 bullets: assess, hypothesize, plan, and execute underneath it. So now that you've got this overarching kind of framework in place, this is where kind of the rubber hits the road around the tactical steps. So I already talked about assessing current state. Does our technology meet our needs today? And do we have the right people that we need to support this? This is something we also see with our customers frequently. The organization and even the people that they have in place aren't the right roles, responsibilities, or team member strengths to support the technology strategy and the technology capabilities that they have or what they need. Second point is around hypothesizing. What are the needs of my business and what are my customers' needs? It's so critical and it seems so obvious, but it's something that we don't really see done or that we often see overlooked. Like, talk to your customers and understand what their needs are. In today's day and age, we're seeing the transportation providers are winning and losing major deals based on how easy it is for them to build integrations into their customers. If that's a capability that you can't offer today, your business may be at risk. The third component is around planning. So this is where you're actually building the roadmap and timeline. Now that you know where you need to go and the steps to get there, this is where you actually build the roadmap and timeline to keep your organization accountable. I think it's critical. We believe that it's critical to find the right partners to help actually execute on this strategy. And that could be team members, that could be third-party help, it could also be the third-party technology providers, but it's so critical that you actually have this plan in place and that you hold the team accountable to executing on the plan. Which brings me to the fourth point, which is really all around execution. This is where you have to enable your team with the ownership to make the right decisions and actually drive progress. And specifically measure progress as needed. And we want to be clear, like, we talk about these plans and holding people accountable to them. There needs to be a healthy amount of kind of like reality associated with that process. If a plan was put in place and something's changed, adjustments may need to be made to the plan. but you also have to ride the line of holding your team accountable to the commitments that they've made. And the best way to we all know that the best way to drive that accountability is to keep the people who are involved with executing on the plan heavily involved in the actual design of it so that they feel ownership. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it back to Ryan.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. We're getting to the end here. I'm on the penultimate slide, no matter what you've got, or second to last slide. Today's 3 focus areas. This is, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So briefly, here's what we told you. Why it's hard. It's hard because you got to make sure you're speaking the same language. You got to make sure you're decoupling what's been done and the challenges that you may face from in getting to the art of the possible. What it means, software is built differently, and modern software allows you to move faster with lower risk while rooting out waste and getting more of what you want. And what to do, decide to where your business is going, gather those business imperatives from across the organization, develop a plan, knowing it'll change over time and to be reviewed. So with that, I'll go to the last slide, which is just our beautiful faces, and we'll open it up to any questions.
Great. Tom, if you could go ahead and instruct it. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open for questions. If you have a question at this time, please press *1 on your telephone to enter the queue. We ask, if listening on speakerphone, please pick up your handset to provide optimal sound quality. Once again, please press *1 on your telephone keypad at this time to ask a question. Please hold while we poll for questions. And there are no questions in queue at this time. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, it'll be *1 on your telephone.
Okay, no worries. I've got some to start us off here. So, gents, apologies here if I fall into the old way of thinking and focus in on some of the specific TMS providers out there. I obviously still have some, change in thought process that needs to happen. But, Peter, I really did like your analogy about, the traditional cable providers and the new streaming services. And if I take that analogy a step further, who would be some of the kind of legacy cable providers in this setup? Are the Mercury Gates and JDAs and SAPs, I guess similar to the Cox, Comcast, and Charter Houses of the world? And if so, are there still benefits to using, some of those old monolithic TMSs? So again, to use your example, if I'm maybe a big sports fan, perhaps it makes sense to use one of the, cable companies. Or if, I'm looking for a setup for my parents who maybe don't want to navigate all these streaming services, maybe one of the traditional, cable service providers still makes sense. Is there a way to extend that analogy farther out into the TMS world?
Yeah. Bruce, great question. And I'll try to be short in my response. So, I would say that the 3 providers that you mentioned, and I would say that if you think of a legacy TMS provider, they typically fall into that bucket of monolithic applications. And in the interest of giving credit where credit is due, some of the legacy providers are making an effort to move into these more microservices-oriented architectures, but the reality is that effectively requires an entire rebuild of their technology. It's not just something that you can do through a migration. So, in terms of the question around whether there's value in still using kind of like an all-in-one package, I mean, from our perspective, it's the answer is absolutely yes. If it hits your if one of these providers their capabilities line up with with the needs of your business and your workflow requirements, then absolutely use them. I mean, something that we often see is because of the valuations that have been associated with some of the providers that have invested in heavy proprietary technology, everyone thinks that they have to build everything for a higher valuation. Well, if you go out and actually spend money building components that are readily available in the market, any potential buyer is going to think that you have literally wasted time, money, and resources on that. I do think so. Kind of summary point is that there are some all-in-one packages that do sometimes makes sense, particularly if you have a simpler business. I think a great example, like, my grandma, my grandma only watches a handful of channels, and those all happen to be ones that the basic cable package comes with. So for her, it makes more sense to use a standard cable package. Whereas, like, my mom watches shows on Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, so it makes more sense for her to have a more flexible, dynamic offering. I think the same thing applies to transportation providers. If you're just doing drive-in, point A to point B truckload freight, sure, there's probably something off the shelf that's an all-encompassing TMS that could work for you. But if you want to do drive-in, solo, team, reefer, maybe a little bit of managed transportation, that's where the technology architecture and the systems that you need start to get more complex, and that's where these monolithic legacy TMS providers start to fall flat. I also do want to make the point that we talk about risk a lot. There's risk going with only a single provider. Like, that provider can ultimately become your bottleneck to innovation because you can only integrate with the other third-party technologies that they choose to. This is something we see all the time with our current customers. They're using a legacy TMS, and they want to take advantage of new visibility technology like Project 44. They can't actually implement Project 44 until their legacy TMS provider says that they've built out the integration and allows them to. So I think that that's a consideration there.
So that's super helpful. And then I guess the follow-up to that is, for somebody that doesn't know, like myself, who are the leading new providers? So, again, using that analogy, if you talk about, the Rokus or Chromecasts or, Apple TVs of the world, can you give us some examples of platforms that allow you to layer on some of these, microservices, and, which ones might be better suited to one category of, say, broker, shipper, or technology provider? So again, for purposes of analogy, if I'm a parent and I've got young kids, maybe Disney Plus is a must. But, if I'm a single guy, maybe I don't want to have Disney Plus. Any kind of recommendations that you can wrap around that part of the analogy?
Sure. So,
yeah,
go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead, Ryan.
Peter, go for it. Okay. I'll throw out just quickly the last point that Peter made around the risk and the cable company being the gatekeepers. At the end of so the two that I see that I personally am the most bullish on that are out there in this new wave are Shipwell and Rose Rocket, because they are built as integration first. So they are looking to build in a way that enables you to integrate with other things, whether it's theirs or someone else's. Peter, go ahead. Add what you're going to say.
So I think in terms of more all-encompassing packages that are flexible to work with others, to Ryan's point, Shipwell and Rose Rocket are great offerings. And you look at those two products, they have a lot of out-of-the-box third-party technology integrations. They're looking at it more as an open infrastructure or an open technology world. I think kind of my follow-on point to that is just that, it's less about finding one provider that does everything and more about looking across your entire business and finding the providers that do exactly what you need the best. Mm-hmm. And that may mean 10 different providers. I know, for business purposes, for instance, there are some folks that use Microsoft Office 365 for everything, and there are other people who may use a series of Google Docs and Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and then Slack, and they use Zoom for conferencing, as opposed to if you just use Microsoft for everything, you have to use Word, you have to use PowerPoint, you have to use Skype for business, for instance. I think that the point that we're trying to make more is about how a series of in the new world of technology, most companies are better off going with a series of technology providers that each focus on one aspect of the workflow, and they're really, really great at that one piece.
I'm going to throw in one follow-up point with it. the value there is you can prioritize what the problems are you're trying to solve. So starting at the center with execution, like is letting go or giving up the ability to make trade-off decisions with other parts of software.
Great. That's perfect. And maybe we can check in one last time, Tom. Are there any questions on the queue?
Yes, there is a question, and the first question is coming from Barry Haynes. Barry, your line is live. Please ask the question.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the call. I wonder if you guys have any thoughts as to which 2 or 3 companies, whether they're clients or non-clients, but in your view have really get this whole technology thing the right way and have done a good job, understand their business, where they're trying to go, et cetera. So I'm just curious if they're, when you look at it through the lens that you look at it through, if there are a couple companies in the industry that stand out in your view. Thanks.
With those, hey Barry, are you talking about like actual capacity providers or technology providers?
No, I'm talking about capacity providers. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So, from my perspective, first one that comes to mind is JB Hunt. And, I'll disclose that they are a customer of ours, but JB Hunt, they've also been very public about their investment and the money that they've, the investments that they've committed to in technology are not, like, parts of it are building these new capabilities like this 360 platform. But a huge chunk, Shelley Simpson has come out and publicly said that at least half of the $500 million that they've invested in technology is just associated with killing mainframes and old legacy technology, and they're making those investments to allow them to move faster. So from my perspective, JB Hunt's a great one example. Another one that comes to mind would be Schneider. We've seen Schneider. Schneider's done I think that Schneider's done a really great job of effectively assessing and leveraging both purchase technology, like Truckstop.com's most recent Book It Now product, and then mixing it in with some of their own proprietary technology for where there's something unique in the market that doesn't, where there's something unique in their business operating model where there's not a technology that exists in the market. So Schneider's the other example that comes to mind for me.
All right, good.
Ryan?
Yeah. I'm going to +1 both of those, and JB Hunt falls really far on the build everything. Schneider falls a little bit more in the middle of leverage capitalism. But what both of them are doing that really makes a difference is unlocking that data and investing heavily on leveraging data to be their differentiator as they go to market. Step 1 is unlocking it.
Great. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
And you have one more question? This question is coming from Ed Prince. Ed, your line is live. Please pose your question.
Hi, it's Ted Prince. Question about dislodging these established TMS. I understand the micro-build, micro-buy philosophy, but the decision to bring in these monolith products was an internal political decision. I've had CEOs tell me that the only reason they went down the path was their board suggested it. The old joke was no one got fired for buying IBM. You can make the case that there's a reduced risk reward, but there's a political risk of sort of flying. This is an industry where everybody wants to be second, nobody wants to be first. So how do you get the people to turn their back on the established way and risk, the political challenge?
I think it's a great question. And, from my perspective, there's risk in every decision. There's more risk in some than others. From our perspective, it's leadership's responsibility to tell the story as to why change has to happen. It's the same, whether it's a major technology change or an organizational change, or how they actually go to market or the services that they offer. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of large publicly traded transportation providers that used to focus in one area expand their service offerings. I think almost every major carrier at this point has at least a minority focus on a brokerage or a non-asset division. To me, like the decision to move in, what may be viewed as kind of a riskier decision to move into this new kind of technology strategy really needs to be made based on like what are the implications of doing it, of like what business models does this new technology strategy enable, and also what are the risks of not doing it. We talk a lot with our customers around the risk associated with not doing it. And what we found is that a lot of these big technology providers, we said it before, they become the gatekeepers to innovation. And so to me, our experience, a huge part of the work that we do is helping with driving consensus around the path forward. It's helping tell the story of what are you missing out on by not moving forward to this. And we've literally seen this firsthand with some large companies that have had board members that have said, hey, this is too risky of a decision. And as soon as we put in front of them, hey, here are 5 new transformational technologies that we wanted to roll out that we weren't able to because of our existing technology provider, like it actually becomes a fairly easy conversation. So that's how we've gone about approaching it.
So just a quick follow-up. Have you found, let's just break ownership into public, private, and owned by private equity. Have you found the inclination to do this differs by the ownership structure?
Yes. My experience has been that private equity can often be, my opinion is depending on the private equity firm, they can be penny wise and dollar foolish. And we've seen over and over again. I think it looks at the timeline that a company actually puts in place for making these investments. I also, like, personal opinion and experience, a lot of publicly traded companies will say, well, we can't afford these investments because we've got to do quarterly earnings and it's going to completely blow up our cost structure. Okay, well, JB Hunt has somehow found a way to do it, and their stock has done well throughout it. C.H. Robinson is another big one that's come out and made big investments. I mean, from my perspective, Wall Street responds pretty well to a well-structured, well-thought-out plan, and they're willing to weather some short-term impacts as long as there's a vision and a story that's being told of how you're getting there. We've also seen that this industry, most technology investments can be capitalized, and this industry hasn't done a great job of delineating between CapEx and OpEx if it's not a truck. And I think that's another kind of lever that can be pulled to help with some of the short-term cost implications.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the questions.
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to pick up on one of the points that you talked about as far as risk. I think we defined pretty well what the risks of sticking with a legacy provider might be. But as far as the risks of going with one of these newfangled providers, what might those be? I mean, we talked about integration. If one of these companies that you mentioned goes bust, if it gets acquired, if they grow too fast, do you as the customer end up getting left holding the bag?
Well, that's why an approach toward 100 smaller decisions is an important one to make with de-risking. You're not betting your whole business on one piece of software so that you can unplug to the extent that the realities of the business change, or the reality of a vendor changes. So say that Mercury Gate got bought by PE a couple of years ago, and if your experience as a Mercury Gate client fundamentally changed, they're not bringing out updates, or they're harder to get their prices go up a bunch to get your custom implementation done or whatever it might be, because private equity is treating that acquisition as a depreciating asset. Again, the cost to change is incredibly high. When you make the pivot to 100 smaller decisions and de-risk that, you are de-risking exactly what you brought up, Bruce. You are de-risking if that company gets bought, if that company grows too fast, if that company goes bust. So you're de-risking all of those decisions.
And I'll add on. I'll give another example. And to be clear, it doesn't always mean that if one of your core technology providers has been acquired, that it's a bad thing. I mean, sometimes there's actually a ton of value in it. And actually, specifically, MercuryGate is one example where my understanding is that the new ownership and leadership that's been put in place is heavily focused on customer experience. We've actually heard some better feedback from customers more recently than prior to the acquisition. But I'll also touch on, I think MacroPoint's a great example. We've talked to dozens of our customers who have had issues with MacroPoint since they were acquired. Basically, there was a lot of goodwill built up with the old leadership team, and when they were acquired, I believe it was by Descartes. Descartes basically looked at MacroPoint as an asset that they had to generate a certain amount of revenue on, and they started changing the way that they they actually started changing the way that they interact with their customers.
Well, that's great. It looks like we're about 10 minutes over time here, so I want to let everyone get back to their day. But gents, Peter, Ryan, Joe, really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through what is, I think for many of us still a pretty complex and nuanced process, but certainly got a lot more clarity out of it, after the hour that we spent with you. If you have any questions, the email addresses for all three of our guests are in the slide deck, but you can also reach out to me, chanb@stifel.com, and I'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Again, thank you very much to our guests today from Carrier Direct, and thank you very much to all of you for listening in.
Yep. Thanks for having us, y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This does conclude today's conference call. You may disconnect your phone lines at this time and have a wonderful day. Thank you for your participation.